Affairs. This morning we're joined by the anthropologist Marianne Hotta and the journalist Shaista Aziz. Ladies, lovely to see you both this morning. Marianne, let's come to you first. Story on the front of the Sunday Express, and what an exclusive. The Chancellor promising to do as much as he can to help people out. I'm not one to criticise kind of colleagues on Fleet Street, but in terms of exclusives, that's pretty weak.
Well, it is, and the promise is quite weak as well in this exclusive interview with the Chancellor. He says he's looking to do everything in my power to help where I can. Now, I don't think it requires a degree in economics or in politics to know that he's not really committing himself to very much at all there. Apparently he's had a number of round tables, discussions with backbench Conservative MPs, just to kind of get the lay of the land, see how people are feeling. For me, I think given the kind of the approach of the government so far is to do very little with regards to the cost of living crisis and leave people to remain terrified of the prospects of the coming days, weeks, months.
Marianne, isn't...
To backbench MPs, I want him to be writing checks.
Marianne, I mean, when the Chancellor says, I will do everything in my power to help, isn't that just another way of saying, do you know what, there are going to be some people out there that I can't help?
Do you know what, that could be it. That could be it, because he's kind of saying, well, I'll do what I can, but that's not going to be everything that you lot want. And when he says you lot, he means people who are one of the people quoted in the article works for Bernardo's, saying that 2/3 of their frontline staff have reported that they've been giving food from their own sort of money from their own pockets to kids for food. Caroline Abrahams from Age UK is saying that some of the people they're working with, older people, are terrified because there are no more cuts they can make. And the thing is, Rishi Sunak does have things in his power to do things that will help, like windfall taxes on the oil and gas giants, things like VAT cuts. And yes, of course, he has to do his economic balancing and not just print money. But again, I don't really think that him kind of going, don't worry, everyone, I do realise this is an actual issue, is reassuring in the least, particularly not if you went from working out whether you can heat or eat and now you can't do either.
Shaista, a not unrelated story then in the front of the Sunday Telegraph, the cabinet turning on the Bank of England, all to do with the cost of living crisis. I am beginning to detect a theme here. When the government has some problems with the legal system, the lawyers and the judiciary come in for the firing line. Now they've got problems with the economy, it's the Bank of England's fault.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a complete derailment, isn't it? So, you know, on one newspaper front page, pretty much the exclusive story is the Chancellor says he's going to do his job. And on this front page, the story is that the government now wants to get into a row with the Bank of England. It's a complete distraction. I mean, the Bank of England needs to retain its independence, and the government needs to come up with a proper, detailed outline of how it's going to tackle the cost of living crisis, which, as Marianne said, is terrifying people. You know, my mum's a pensioner. Her bills have gone up by at least £400, and she's really scared and worried about what she's going to do, and she's not the only person here. You know, the cost of living crisis hasn't just happened overnight because of the horrific conflict in the Ukraine. This also needs to be tackled in terms of the way the government's trying to frame this crisis. But, you know, a lot more needs to be done, and I also think that, you know, the government needs to organise proper, robust discussions with you know, energy giants and others to get to the bottom of what they're going to do.
Shaista, none of which is to say that, of course, the Bank of England doesn't have some tools at its disposal, macroeconomic tools that it can use. But, you know, there are people who are in agreement with these kind of unnamed cabinet ministers, including the bank's former chief economist, Andy Haldane, saying that the bank had squandered a chance to tackle the cost of living crisis by failing to get inflation under control.
Well, I don't think now is the time to start some sort of political, you know, row with the Bank of England. I think what ministers need to do is focus on the task in hand, which is to explain what they're going to do to help the British people through this crisis. That's what they need to be focusing on, not getting into some sort of, you know, disagreement, which is going to play out for months and months and months as we lead into winter. And yes, of course, the Bank of England needs to look at all of its options and make sure that it's doing everything it can to assist people during this crisis.
Take us to the front of the Sunday Times, Marianne. Jeremy Hunt, remember him, the guy who was Health Secretary for us, the opening paragraph points out, almost 6 years, now complaining about the health service that he led for, almost 6 years.
Yes, indeed. So this is with regards to a book that he's just published that is serialised in the Times today called Zero, and it's about eliminating all avoidable deaths. And basically, this is the revelation that Jeremy Hunt is a good guy and tried to change the system, but the system is still broken. That system being one of fear of transparency, of wanting to cover up mistakes, and that leading to basically more mistakes being made, lessons not being learned, patients and patients' families struggling, really having to battle for answers when something has gone terribly wrong. For example, at the Morecambe Bay maternity services scandal, families have desperately sought for very important answers to tragic cases. He points out that there are about 150 avoidable deaths every week in the NHS. So these aren't things unexpected, but these things happen in the course of major surgery or something like these. These are mistakes being made and it costing someone their life. But he kind of goes on to point out that apparently he says, it's not rogue staff, not a rogue hospital, but a rogue system where even if there's an individual who wants to try and do the right thing and write that letter of apology to a patient or patient's family, have that meeting, have that kind of open discussion with staff in a department about what's going wrong and what we need to do about it, the system prevents that from happening. And there's a culture within the organisation that says, actually, that's just going to erode public trust in the NHS. It's going to expose us to lawsuits that we can't fight. The thing is, though, we have to remember that a system is comprised of individuals, and the health secretary, I think, really ought to, take a blow, because they are the minister at the head of that. They can't fix every single individual staff interaction in an organisation as big as the NHS, but I think you can say collectively the system is broken, but it's a collective of individuals who need to fix it. And it costs people their lives. So well done, Jeremy Hunt, for saying something, but I'm not convinced that his motivations for this radical exclusive are not entirely self-serving.
150 avoidable deaths a week. By mathematics, that's just less than 8,000 a year. It's a huge total. Clearly something needs to be done. Shaista, let's go to the front of the Sunday People, and you're going to have to explain exactly what this story is all about, but it's certainly involving Levi Belfield.
Yeah, so Levi Belfield is asking for permission to get married, and his ex-wife is speaking out to say that she's very concerned that the woman involved with him in a relationship with him, I mean, he's behind bars, so I'm not quite sure what kind of relationship that is, but nonetheless, she's very concerned that this woman has been brainwashed and has been coerced and is under some sort of control by this man. Now, I do find this very, very disturbing, but also there is a phenomena, well documented one, of women getting into relationships with violent men while they're in prison, and very high-profile individuals who've gone through the criminal justice system. And, we do have to question the vulnerability of this individual woman. And also, there will be some people who say, well, it's his human rights to get married. But I am very, very worried, to put it mildly, that this woman thinks it's a good idea to get involved with a man who is in prison, basically, for heinous crimes.
Shaista, do we have any understanding of this phenomenon? Because I have to admit, as you rightly say, it's been well covered, well documented, but every single time one of these stories crops up in the papers, I am kind of left scratching my head, going, what on earth is the attraction?
Yeah, I don't think there is any, proper, evidence in relation to why this is happening. But I do think the way these stories are covered are also very disturbing. I mean, essentially, this woman is vulnerable and needs some help. And it's very evident that this man, who's a very well-known, manipulator and someone who's been in prison for a very high-profile crime, why is he being allowed to manipulate another woman in the way that he is? So I think that is the angle that we need to focus on. And there needs to be some empathy for these women as well, because these stories keep popping up, but they're kind of like reported as tabloid fodder rather than getting to the bottom of what's going on.
Marianne, the front of The Observer, an incredibly concerning story about the state of England schools.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the government departments on the papers, front pages this morning, and none of the stories are good. So this is a series of leaked emails that the Observer has seen that were sent from the Education Secretary's staff, so Naheem Zahawi, being sent to Downing Street, saying basically, we need an awful lot more money because the state of school buildings in England is now a risk to life in some places. There have been 2 occasions in the last 6 weeks where school buildings have been in such a state of disrepair they put pupils or staff at risk. And they're saying they want to go from 50 school sort of rebuilding or major repair projects a year. So currently there's 50 a year. They need 300 a year in order to actually get our schools back into a state of repair that is safe for kids to be there, which requires about £13 billion. Now that is a lot of money, but also a roof collapsing in on a school and all the children inside it is just unthinkable. Again, you can't wake up to this news and you think, it's 2022, I live in Britain, and the world is falling out of the sky around my ears. How are we in this situation? It beggars belief, but basically they're asking for more money because the state is in such disrepair.
Marianne, Shaista, we will see you both again next hour for the second outing on the papers. For now, thanks very much indeed. You can stay right where you are. Coming up after the break, we will have the very latest, as at least 10 people have been shot dead in what US police say was a racially motivated shooting in the city of Buffalo in New York State. That's next.